I'm Amanda, 28 years old, and my life changed forever when I bought a tiny fixer-upper for $3,600 in rural Illinois. My sister Jessica wanted $5,000 for her wellness retreat in California, and my parents expected me to contribute $3,000. When I revealed my house purchase instead, my mother's face contorted with rage. "You're dead to us," she screamed, while my father and sister stared in silent agreement. That moment crystallized years of being the family afterthought compared to my golden child sister. If you've ever had to choose yourself over unfair family expectations, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of self-discovery. Growing up in suburban Chicago, our middle-class lifestyle never felt equally distributed between me and my sister. Our parents, Richard and Margaret Wilson, worked respectable jobs. Dad as a sales manager at an office supply company and Mom as an administrative assistant at the local high school. They provided us with comfortable lives, but comfort came with strings attached, especially for me. Jessica, 3 years my senior, was always the star of our family constellation. Her achievements were celebrated with elaborate parties, while mine received obligatory acknowledgement. I still remember my 16th birthday when my parents gave Jessica more attention than me because she'd just been accepted to a summer internship. My birthday dinner turned into a celebration of her accomplishment, with my parents ordering champagne for the adults to toast her success. My new driver's license barely warranted a mention. Jessica has always been more sensitive, Mom would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. She needs more encouragement to thrive. Meanwhile, I was labeled the practical one, or the independent one. Code for the one we don't need to worry about, or the one who can fend for herself. This pattern persisted throughout our childhood. When Jessica struggled in calculus, my parents hired an expensive tutor. When I needed help with French, they suggested I form a study group with classmates. When Jessica wanted to attend a $2,000 volleyball camp, they made it happen. When I qualified for a national debate competition, they complained about the $300 travel expense. The financial discrepancy became even more apparent as we entered adulthood. Jessica majored in communications at a private university, changing her concentration 3 times before graduating. My parents covered her apartment, meal plan, and spending money. Meanwhile, I attended a state school for accounting, worked 30 hours weekly between a campus job and weekend retail position, and still graduated with student loans. After college, Jessica bounced between career paths like a pinball. First, she worked at a PR firm but quit after 6 months because the environment was too corporate. Then came her yoga instructor phase, which lasted until she realized teaching 5 classes daily was physically demanding. Next was her attempt at food blogging, abandoned when she discovered how difficult it was to monetize. Each career change came with expenses, certifications, equipment, website designs that mysteriously became family financial emergencies requiring immediate solution. "Your sister is trying to find her path," Dad would say when I questioned these bailouts. "We need to support her journey." My journey, meanwhile, involved working 60-hour weeks at an accounting firm while moonlighting as a bookkeeper for local businesses to pay off my student loans ahead of schedule. By 28, I had finally cleared my debt and saved nearly $20,000, no small feat in today's economy. I lived in a modest apartment with a roommate, Rachel, who had recently announced her engagement and plans to move in with her fiancé. This meant my rent would either double or I'd need to find another roommate, neither option appealing as Chicago rental prices continued climbing beyond reasonable levels. One evening, while scanning real estate listings out of curiosity rather than serious intent, I stumbled across something that seemed like a mistake: a 600-square-foot house listed for $3,600 in a rural town called Millfield, about 2 hours from Chicago. The listing had terrible photos showing a clearly dilapidated structure, which explained the rock-bottom price. It was being sold through a tax auction after the previous owner had abandoned the property. "This can't be real," Rachel said, peering over my shoulder at my laptop screen. "That's less than most people's security deposits." "It's probably a scam," I agreed, but curiosity compelled me to email the county office handling the auction. To my surprise, I received a response the next morning confirming the listing's legitimacy. The representative explained that rural areas often had these ultra-cheap properties that nobody wanted because of their condition and location. This particular house had been vacant for years, had no working utilities, and would require significant renovation to be habitable. Most people would have been deterred. I was intrigued. The accountant in me immediately began calculating costs versus potential value. Even if I put $15,000 into renovations, I'd still have a mortgage-free home for less than $20,000 total, a fraction of a down payment in Chicago. That weekend, I drove out to Millfield to see the property in person. The listing photos hadn't lied about its condition, but something about the little house spoke to me. Standing in the overgrown yard, I didn't see the sagging porch or the broken windows. I saw possibility. I saw freedom. The first time I walked through my potential new home, I had to watch my step to avoid falling through rotted floorboards. The real estate agent, who seemed surprised anyone had actually shown up to view the property, kept apologizing for its condition. "It's been vacant for about 7 years," she explained, carefully testing each step on the creaking porch. "The previous owner died, and his children live out of state. They never came to claim it or pay the property taxes, so the county seized it." At 600 square feet, the house was tiny by any standard, about the size of a one-bedroom apartment. It consisted of a small living room, a kitchen with ancient appliances, one bedroom, and a bathroom with fixtures that might have been installed when Nixon was president. The roof leaked in at least 3 places, which had caused water damage to the ceiling and walls. There was no central heating or air conditioning, just a wood-burning stove in the living room that the agent warned might not be up to code. "Most people who buy these properties just bulldoze them and start fresh," she said, watching me inspect a window frame that had partially separated from the wall. But bulldozing wasn't in my plans or my budget. Despite its sorry state, the house had good bones. The foundation appeared solid, and the frame wasn't compromised. The electrical wiring would need complete replacement, as would the plumbing, but those were solvable problems. What made this house particularly appealing was its location on a full acre of land at the edge of Millfield, population 837. Behind the property stretched a field of corn, and to one side ran a small creek. The nearest neighbor was visible, but not close enough to hear normal conversation. After years of sharing walls with strangers in Chicago apartments, the privacy felt luxurious. Millfield itself was small but not desolate. It had a grocery store, a diner, a hardware store, and even a small library. Most importantly, it had high-speed internet available, crucial since I planned to eventually negotiate remote work with my firm. The auction process was surprisingly straightforward. After doing my due diligence, checking for liens on the property and confirming there were no legal issues with the title, I submitted my bid of $3,600, which was the minimum required. No one else bid, and just like that, I owned a house. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. My co-workers were bewildered. "You're going to live 2 hours from civilization in a house that doesn't even have running water?" my cubicle neighbor asked incredulously when I showed him photos. But I had a vision that others couldn't see. I'd spent countless hours watching renovation videos on YouTube. During college, I'd worked summers with a construction company doing bookkeeping, but had often observed the crews at work. I'd even taken a few weekend workshops at the local hardware store on basic home repair. My plan was methodical, as befitted my accounting background. First, I'd make the house weathertight, fixing the roof, windows, and exterior walls. Then I'd address the structural issues inside, replacing damaged floor joists and wall studs. Next would come the systems, electrical, plumbing, and heating. Finally, I'd tackle the cosmetic elements like drywall, flooring, and fixtures. I created a detailed spreadsheet breaking down projected costs: roof repair, $2,000 for materials. I planned to do the labor myself with help from YouTube tutorials, structural repairs, $1,500 for lumber, and supplies electrical system. $2,500. I need a professional for this, plumbing. $2,000, another professional job, heating/cooling. $1,800 for a mini split system windows and doors. $1,200 insulation. $800 drywall and flooring. $1,500 kitchen and bathroom fixtures, $1,200 miscellaneous and contingency, $1,500 total, $16,000, nearly my entire savings, but it would leave me with a paid-off home that would be worth significantly more than my investment. The timeline I set was ambitious but not impossible. I would continue living and working in Chicago during the week, then drive to Millfield every Friday evening, and work on the house through Sunday. I estimated it would take about 8 months of weekends to make the place habitable. In the meantime, I planned to sleep in a tent on the property during work weekends when weather permitted, or in my car when it didn't. Each time I visited the property, my vision became clearer. I imagined morning coffee on the porch overlooking the creek. I pictured a small vegetable garden in the side yard. I envisioned quiet evenings reading by the wood stove. After years of living according to others' expectations and needs, this tiny broken house represented something I desperately wanted, a life that was entirely mine, built with my own hands. I created a virtual tour for my friend Rachel, walking her through the property while on a video call. "It's definitely rustic," she said diplomatically when I showed her the bathroom with its cracked sink and mysterious stains. "It's a disaster," I laughed. "But it won't be for long." "I have to admit, I didn't get it when you first told me about this place," Rachel said. "But seeing how excited you are, it makes sense now. This is your blank canvas." That's exactly what it was. While Jessica had spent years trying to find herself through expensive programs and retreats, I would find myself by building something tangible, something that would appreciate in value rather than evaporate like workshop wisdom. I researched Millfield thoroughly before committing fully to my plan. The town had experienced modest population growth in recent years as remote work made rural living more viable. Property values had increased steadily, if not dramatically. The crime rate was low, and the small school was well regarded. Several residents commuted to larger towns for work, making my plan to eventually work remotely seem less unusual. The more I learned, the more confident I became in my decision. This wasn't just an impulsive purchase, it was a calculated investment in my future, one that would free me from the rental market and give me an asset that would grow in value over time. All it would require was hard work, determination, and the willingness to live without certain comforts temporarily. What I didn't calculate, however, was how my family would react to my decision, particularly when it collided with their expectations that I would once again open my wallet to fund Jessica's latest self-improvement venture. The family dinner that changed everything happened on a Sunday evening in late April. Mom had made her signature pot roast, Jessica's favorite, and Dad had opened a bottle of expensive Cabernet. I should have recognized the signs of a setup. Special meal, good wine, everyone being unusually nice to each other. These elements typically preceded a request for money. Jessica looked different than she had at Christmas. Her normally highlighted blonde hair was now its natural brown, and she'd traded her usual makeup for a barefaced look that she described as honoring my authentic self. She wore a loose linen outfit in a shade of beige that, according to her, wasn't beige but earth clay. "I've been having these awful headaches and fatigue," Jessica announced as Mom served the roast. "My doctor ran tests and said there's nothing medically wrong, but my holistic nutritionist thinks I'm suffering from adrenal fatigue and inflammatory response to environmental toxins." Dad nodded gravely while Mom made sympathetic noises. I focused on cutting my meat, having heard variations of this conversation before. Every few months, Jessica discovered a new health concern that required expensive intervention not covered by insurance. "That sounds serious," Mom said. "What does your nutritionist recommend?" Jessica's face brightened. "That's what I wanted to talk about." She told me about this amazing wellness retreat in Northern California called Serenity Springs. It's this exclusive program where they do personalized detoxification, stress management, nutritional reprogramming, and spiritual alignment. "Sounds comprehensive," Dad commented, refilling Jessica's wine glass, which seemed at odds with the detoxification program, but I kept that observation to myself. "It's life-changing," Jessica continued. "Remember Alexis from my yoga certification course? She went last year and came back completely transformed. She's now running her own wellness coaching business, making six figures. I bit my tongue. Jessica had a habit of knowing people who achieved miraculous results from whatever program she was currently interested in, yet these same programs never seemed to yield similar outcomes for her. How long is this retreat? I asked, genuinely curious about what justified the inevitably exorbitant price tag. It's a full week of intensive healing, Jessica said with an edge of defensiveness. The practitioners are world-renowned experts. The chef has cooked for celebrities and royalty. They limit it to 12 participants to ensure personalized attention. Sounds exclusive, I remarked neutrally. It is, Jessica confirmed. That's why it's such an amazing opportunity that they had a last-minute cancellation. I can take the spot in 3 weeks if I can pull together the funds. There it was, the purpose of the dinner. How much does something like that cost? Dad asked, though I suspected he already knew. Jessica took a deep breath. It's $5,600 for the week. That includes accommodation, all meals, and all the therapeutic sessions. I nearly choked on my water. That was more than I'd paid for my house and 2 months of renovation materials combined. But it's an investment in my health and future, Jessica quickly added. Alexis says her business took off directly because of connections she made at the retreat. Some of the participants are really successful entrepreneurs looking for wellness coaches. And you want to be a wellness coach now? I asked, remembering her previous enthusiasm for event planning, which had lasted approximately 3 months. I've been moving in this direction for a while, Jessica said with a hint of irritation. My yoga training, my nutrition certification, my meditation practice, it's all been leading to this. The retreat would help me bring it all together into a cohesive practice. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their looks, the kind that contained an entire conversation invisible to others. We think this could be really good for you, honey, Mom said. Both for your health and your career direction. We'd like to help, Dad added, but it's a significant amount on short notice. We can contribute $2,000 toward it. Jessica's face fell slightly, but she quickly recovered. That's so generous. Thank you. Then all 3 of them turned to look at me. The silence stretched uncomfortably as I realized what was happening. Amanda, Jessica finally said, her voice taking on the gentle tone she used when trying to persuade someone. I know you're so good with money. You're always saving and being responsible. She said responsible like it was a mildly interesting hobby rather than a life choice. I was hoping you might be able to help with the remaining $3,600, the exact amount I'd paid for my house. The coincidence felt almost cosmic. I don't have that kind of money available right now, I said carefully, avoiding mentioning my recent purchase. I wasn't ready to share that news yet, not when I knew it would be met with criticism rather than celebration. But you're always saving, Mom pointed out. Surely, you have something set aside for emergencies. This isn't exactly an emergency, I replied. It's a voluntary retreat. It's for her health, Dad countered, his tone indicating he thought I was being deliberately obtuse. And her career, Mom added. This could be the opportunity that finally sets her on a stable path. Jessica reached across the table to touch my hand. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'd pay you back once my coaching business takes off. Think of it as investing in a family business. I withdrew my hand, uncomfortable with the emotional manipulation. I need to think about it, I said, knowing even as the words left my mouth that my answer would ultimately be no. The rest of dinner passed with tension simmering beneath polite conversation. Jessica talked extensively about the retreat's amenities, private cabins with organic bedding, daily massage therapy, personalized meal plans based on blood type and astrological sign. Each detail made me more certain that this was yet another expensive whim that would yield no lasting change. As I drove home that night, my mind was a battleground of conflicting emotions. Guilt tugged at me, the familiar feeling that I was somehow wrong for not sacrificing my needs for Jessica's wants. Anger simmered beneath the guilt, resentment at being treated like a personal bank rather than a sister. And beneath both those feelings lay a deeper determination. It was time to break this pattern. My house represented my chance to build a life on my own terms. I wasn't going to sacrifice that opportunity to fund another of Jessica's ephemeral dreams. For once, my dreams would take priority. The following Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house with a folder containing photos of my new property and preliminary renovation plans. I'd spent the week gathering quotes from contractors, researching building codes for Millfield, and creating a detailed timeline for the work. I was excited to share my project, hoping against hope that my family might finally see that I was building something meaningful. Mom had made lasagna, my favorite, which momentarily raised my spirits. Perhaps they'd sensed my hesitation about Jessica's retreat and wanted to make amends. "Before we eat," I said when everyone was seated, "I have some news I'd like to share." "We have news too," Jessica interrupted, practically bouncing in her seat. "But you go first." I opened my folder and placed the first photo on the table, a shot of my tiny house with me standing proudly on its dilapidated porch. "I bought a house," I announced, unable to keep the smile from my face. "It's small and needs a lot of work, but it's mine, free and clear."
"No mortgage."
Silence greeted my announcement. Mom picked up the photo, frowning as she examined it. "This isn't a house," she said finally. "It's a shed." "It's 600 square feet," I corrected. "Small, yes, but it's officially a single-family residence. It has a bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and living area." "Where's this place?" Dad asked, taking the photo from Mom. "A town called Millfield, about 2 hours from Chicago. It's rural but has all the basics, and property values are starting to rise as more remote workers move to the area." 2 hours away. Mom looked appalled. "Why would you want to live so far from civilization?" "It's not uncivilized," I said, feeling defensive. "It's just small and quiet. And I'm not moving there immediately. I'll be renovating it on weekends while still working in Chicago." "How much did you pay for this project?" Dad asked, his tone suggesting he thought I'd been swindled. $3,600, I said, watching their reactions carefully. Jessica gasped. "That's impossible." "Not for rural properties in need of significant renovation," I explained. "It was sold at a tax auction after being abandoned for years. I'll need to put about $15,000 more into renovations, but even then, I'll own a home outright for less than $20,000 total." Instead of the congratulations I'd hoped for, my parents exchanged concerned glances. "Amanda," Mom said in her talking to a child voice, "have you had this property properly inspected?
It could be a money pit."
There might be structural issues, black mold, asbestos. "I've done my research," I interrupted, pulling out the inspection report I'd commissioned. "Yes, it needs work, but nothing that can't be addressed with careful planning. The foundation is solid, and the frame is intact." "But why would you want to live in the middle of nowhere?" Jessica asked, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "There can't be any decent restaurants or yoga studios." "Not everyone wants the same things you do," I replied, trying to keep irritation from my voice. "I want space, quiet, and financial freedom." "Speaking of financial matters," Dad interjected, "have you thought more about helping your sister with the retreat costs?" And there it was. The real reason for their lukewarm response to my news. My house purchase directly conflicted with their expectation that I would fund Jessica's retreat. "Actually," I said carefully, "the timing of my house purchase means I don't have the extra funds right now. All my remaining savings are allocated for critical renovations." "You spent your money on this shack instead of helping your sister?" Mom's voice had risen an octave. "I spent my money on an investment in my future," I corrected. "The house will appreciate in value as I improve it." "Jessica's retreat is an investment in her future," Dad countered. "And her health." "Yes," Jessica jumped in, "and I'd pay you back once my wellness coaching business takes off after the retreat." I took a deep breath. "Jessica, how many career paths have you tried in the last 5 years? And how many times have Mom and Dad or I helped fund those ventures? Has any of that investment paid off yet?" Jessica's face flushed. "That's not fair. I've been finding my path. At everyone else's expense," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Amanda," Mom snapped. Apologize to your sister. For what? Stating facts. I've worked incredibly hard for every dollar I've saved. I paid my own way through college. I worked multiple jobs to pay off my student loans early. I've never asked any of you for financial help, not once. Meanwhile, Jessica has received tens of thousands of dollars from this family with nothing to show for it. We support each other in this family, Dad said sternly. That's what families do. No, I countered. You support Jessica. I support myself. And apparently, I'm expected to support Jessica too. You're being selfish, Mom declared. Your sister has a real opportunity here, and you're choosing to throw your money away on some fantasy of playing house in the woods. My house isn't a fantasy, I said, gathering my photos and documents back into the folder. It's a tangible asset that will provide me with financial security. Jessica's retreat is a $5,000 vacation disguised as a career move. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe you think so little of me. This retreat could change everything for me. Just like the yoga certification was going to change everything, or the food blog, or the event planning business, or the pottery studio membership. That's enough. Mom slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. I won't have you belittling your sister's aspirations. What about my aspirations? I demanded, suddenly unwilling to back down as I typically did. Why is her dream of becoming a wellness coach, after a single week-long retreat, no less, more valid than my dream of homeownership? Because her retreat is a legitimate opportunity, Dad said. Your house project is just you running away from responsibility. Responsibility? I laughed incredulously. I'm the most responsible person in this room. I'm the only one who lives within my means and plans for the future. How is that running away from responsibility? Your responsibility to your family, Mom clarified, her voice icy, which you're clearly abandoning for this selfish project. It's not selfish to invest in myself, I said quietly. I've spent my entire life watching you prioritize Jessica's wants over my needs. For once, I'm choosing myself. Well, if that broken-down shack is more important to you than your sister's well-being, then maybe you should just go live there now, Mom said, her voice rising with each word. In fact, if you walk out that door without agreeing to help Jessica, you can consider yourself no longer part of this family. Margaret, Dad began, looking uncomfortable with the ultimatum. No, Richard, Mom cut him off. I'm tired of her selfish attitude. After everything we've done for her. What exactly have you done for me? I interrupted, a lifetime of suppressed resentment suddenly boiling over. When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever celebrated my achievements the way you celebrate Jessica's smallest efforts? We've always treated you girls equally, Dad protested weakly. That's a lie and you know it, I said, standing up. Jessica has always been the golden child, and I've always been an afterthought. The only thing you've ever valued about me is my willingness to clean up everyone else's messes, especially financial ones. How dare you speak to us this way? Mom hissed, also standing. After all we've sacrificed for you. Name one sacrifice you've made specifically for me, I challenged. Just one. The silence that followed was deafening. That's what I thought, I said, gathering my purse and the folder of house documents. I'm going to leave now before we say things that can't be unsaid. If you leave now, without agreeing to help your sister, Mom said, her voice trembling with rage, then you're dead to us. I froze, the words hitting me like a physical blow. I'd expected anger, disappointment, even emotional manipulation, but not this. Not outright rejection.
Mom.
Jessica gasped, apparently shocked by the severity of the ultimatum. I looked at my father, hoping he might intervene, but he just stared at his plate. His silence was as damning as my mother's words. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally, surprised by the steadiness of my voice despite the tears threatening to spill. But I won't set myself on fire to keep Jessica warm anymore. As I walked toward the door, Jessica called after me. Amanda, please. You're overreacting. We can work this out. I turned back one last time. There's nothing to work out. Mom just disowned me because I won't give you $3,600, the exact amount I paid for my house. If you can't see how messed up that is, then we have nothing more to discuss. I walked out the door and got into my car. Only when I was a block away did I pull over and let the tears come. I cried for the family I thought I had, for the approval I would never receive, for the conditional love that had always been dependent on my compliance. I cried until my eyes burned and my throat ached. Then I started the car again and drove, not back to my apartment, but straight to Millfield, to my house, to the future I was building for myself, with or without my family's blessing. The morning after the confrontation with my family, I woke up in my car parked outside my dilapidated house. I'd driven through the night, fueled by a mixture of adrenaline, anger, and grief, arriving in Millfield well after midnight. After crying myself to sleep in the reclined driver's seat, I awoke stiff, emotionally drained, and momentarily disoriented. Reality came flooding back as I stared at the sagging porch of my tiny house. This was my new beginning. This broken-down structure that my mother had dismissed as a shack and a fantasy. Looking at it in the harsh morning light, doubt crept in. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I truly throwing away my family for a building that currently couldn't even keep out the rain? My phone had died overnight, which felt oddly appropriate. I was utterly alone with my decision. I rummaged in my trunk for the emergency kit I always kept there, finding a granola bar and bottle of water for breakfast. As I sat on my car hood eating the dry bar, an old pickup truck slowed on the road and then turned into my driveway. A gray-haired man in overalls stepped out, regarding me with friendly curiosity. "Morning," he called. "You must be the new owner." I nodded, suddenly conscious of my rumpled clothes and tear-stained face. "Amanda Wilson," I said, walking over to shake his hand. "Frank Howell," he replied. "I live about a quarter-mile down the road. Saw your car here early and figured I'd check if everything's all right. Just spending some time at my new property," I said, trying to sound like someone who had her life together and wasn't sleeping in her car after being disowned by her family. Frank glanced at the house, then back at me. "Got big plans for the old Mercer place, I imagine?" "Mercer?" I asked. Tom Mercer owned this house for nearly 40 years before he passed. Good man. Kept the place nice until his health failed. Frank studied the house with a hint of sadness. Shame to see it fall apart these last few years. Something about knowing the house had once been someone's well-loved home made me stand a little straighter. "I'm going to restore it," I said with more confidence than I felt. "It'll take time, but I'll bring it back." Frank nodded approvingly. "Good to hear. Need any help today? I've got some tools in the truck." That simple offer of assistance from a stranger broke through the remaining shell of my composure. To my mortification, I burst into tears. Rather than being put off, Frank just waited patiently while I pulled myself together. "Sorry," I finally managed. "It's been a rough night." "Life's full of those," he said simply. "Offer still stands." That day, Frank helped me clear the overgrown yard enough to actually see the full exterior of the house. He brought over his chainsaw to remove a dead tree that was dangerously close to the roof, and together we pulled years of accumulated junk from the shed behind the house. As we worked, Frank introduced me to two more neighbors who stopped by after hearing about the city girl fixing up the Mercer place. By afternoon, I had met Diane, who ran the local hardware store and promised me a neighbor discount, and Miguel, who worked as a contractor in the next town over and offered to look at my roof the following weekend. Millfield's small, but folks look out for each other, Frank explained as we took a break on the porch steps, drinking lemonade that Diane had brought over. "Most of us have known each other our whole lives. It's different from Chicago," I admitted. "In my apartment building, I barely know my neighbors' names." "That's no way to live," Frank said, shaking his head. "People need community." That word, community, struck a chord. All my life, I'd thought of family as my only meaningful community. Now that connection had been severed, yet here I was, surrounded by strangers willing to help simply because I was now part of their community. Over the next few weekends, I fell into a renovation routine. I'd drive to Millfield after work on Friday, camp in a small tent I'd purchased, upgrading from sleeping in my car, and work from dawn until dusk Saturday and Sunday before heading back to Chicago. My first major project was the roof. Miguel brought his nephew, who worked with him in construction, and together they taught me how to identify and replace damaged rafters, install new plywood sheathing, and properly lay shingles. I worked alongside them, learning by doing, my soft office hands quickly developing calluses and my pale skin tanning under the spring sun. "You're a natural," Miguel's nephew Luis told me after I successfully installed a section of shingles on my own. Most people wouldn't tackle a roof as their first renovation project. "I don't have much choice," I replied. "Can't do anything inside until the house is weathertight." The physical labor was therapeutic. Each nail I hammered seemed to drive out a little of the pain from my family's rejection. Each rotted board I replaced felt like removing a toxic piece of my past. At night, exhausted from the day's work, I slept deeply in my tent, too tired even to check my phone for the messages and missed calls that had initially flooded in from Jessica, though notably, not from my parents. My Chicago friends, concerned about my sudden weekend disappearances and emotional state, eventually insisted on visiting. Rachel and her fiancé David drove out one Saturday, bringing lunch and extra tools. "Okay, I get it now," Rachel said after touring the property and meeting some of my new neighbors. "This place has good energy, and the progress you've made is incredible." She was right. In just a few weekends, the exterior transformation was already visible. The roof no longer sagged, the yard was cleared, and I'd started replacing broken windows with new energy-efficient ones that Diane had helped me order at cost. "How are things with your family?" David asked as we ate sandwiches on the newly reinforced porch. I stared out at the creek running along the edge of my property. Radio silence from my parents. Jessica keeps texting, alternating between guilt trips and anger. "Did she go to her retreat?" Rachel asked.
Yeah.
My parents paid for the whole thing. I tried to keep the bitterness from my voice. She's posted about 50 Instagram photos of juice cleanses and yoga poses with captions about authentic living and releasing toxic relationships. "Wow," David said. "That's ironic? Hypocritical? On brand," I suggested. "All of the above," Rachel agreed. "But look at what you've accomplished while she was getting overpriced massages. You're building something real." She was right. While Jessica had been finding herself at Serenity Springs, I had been finding my strength in Millfield. I'd learned how to replace a roof, repair window frames, and reinforce floor joists. I'd started sketching plans for the kitchen renovation and researching composting toilets as an alternative to replacing the entire septic system. More importantly, I'd begun building connections with the Millfield community. I'd attended a town council meeting where several residents had welcomed me warmly. I'd volunteered at a community cleanup day for the local park. I'd even adopted a stray cat that had been hanging around my property, naming him Thomas in honor of the house's original owner. As spring turned to summer, I noticed something profound changing within me. The initial hurt of my family's rejection was still there, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. Instead, I found myself focused on the future. Planning improvements, imagining how I'd arrange furniture in each room, considering which fruit trees to plant along the property line. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching fireflies emerge over the field beyond our yard, I realized I hadn't checked Jessica's social media in days. I hadn't anxiously reviewed my text messages hoping for an apology from my parents. I hadn't felt that familiar twist of guilt when thinking about setting boundaries. Instead, I felt peace and pride. Not just in the physical progress of the house, but in my own growth. For the first time in my life, I was living entirely on my terms, measuring my worth by my own standards rather than my family's approval. My house was still far from finished, but I was becoming whole in a way I'd never been before. 3 months after our falling out, Jessica texted me out of the blue. "Mom and Dad want to see you. Dinner this Sunday? Please come. We miss you." I stared at the message for a long time, conflicted emotions swirling through me. Part of me yearned to repair the family bonds. Another part feared falling back into old dysfunctional patterns. After consulting with Rachel, who reminded me that I could always leave if things went south, I cautiously agreed. Sunday evening found me parked outside my parents' house, gripping the steering wheel and giving myself a pep talk. You're stronger now. You have boundaries. You have a life you're building on your own terms. The moment I walked through the door, the familiar smell of Mom's cooking and the sound of Dad's favorite jazz station created a powerful wave of nostalgia. For a brief moment, it felt like nothing had changed. Then I saw Jessica and reality snapped back into focus. She looked dramatically different from 3 months ago. Her hair was now platinum blonde with lavender tips, and she wore a flowing white kaftan with multiple crystal necklaces. Her arms opened wide as she rushed toward me. Amanda, I'm so glad you came. She enveloped me in a hug that smelled of patchouli and something herbal. We have so much to catch up on. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was difficult to read, a mixture of awkwardness and something that might have been regret. Amanda, she said stiffly, you look healthy. Rural living agrees with me, I replied, equally formal. Dad entered from the living room, nodding in acknowledgement. Good to see you, he said, which was more than I'd expected. Dinner was a strange affair. We sat at the same table where our last explosive confrontation had occurred, now carefully navigating trivial conversation as if treading through a minefield. The weather, a cousin's new baby, the rising price of groceries. No one mentioned my house. No one referenced Mom's "you're dead to us" declaration. The elephant in the room grew so large it became hard to breathe around it. Finally, as Mom served dessert, my favorite lemon pie, clearly a peace offering, Jessica could no longer contain herself. I have to tell you about the retreat, she burst out. Amanda, it was life-changing, truly transformative. I connected with my authentic self in ways I never thought possible. That's great, I said neutrally, taking a small bite of pie. The practitioners there helped me release so many limiting beliefs and ancestral traumas. We did breath work, sound baths, cacao ceremonies, past life regressions. Sounds comprehensive, I interjected, using the same phrase Dad had used when Jessica first described the retreat.
It was.
And the people. I made such incredible connections. There was this venture capitalist from San Francisco who's funding wellness startups, and a former tech executive who's now a spiritual guide to celebrities. Mom and Dad exchanged pleased glances. Jessica has been so focused since she returned, Mom said proudly. Tell Amanda about your new business plan. Jessica straightened in her chair, her multiple crystal necklaces clinking together. I'm launching my own wellness coaching practice, Radiant Authenticity with Jessica Wilson. I'll be offering one-on-one coaching, group workshops, and eventually my own retreats. Congratulations, I said, genuinely hoping this venture would work out better than her previous attempts. Have you started seeing clients? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jessica's face. I'm in the setup phase right now, building my website, creating my programs, designing my brand aesthetics. I'm working with a business coach who specializes in wellness entrepreneurs. That sounds expensive, I observed before I could stop myself. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. It's an investment in her future, Dad finally said, echoing his earlier defense of the retreat. Just like your house project, Mom added, attempting diplomacy. Speaking of which, Jessica said brightly, clearly trying to change the subject, how's that going? Have you fixed it up yet? There was something condescending in her tone, as if she expected me to have abandoned the project by now. Rather than being offended, I felt a surge of pride. It's coming along wonderfully, I replied, pulling out my phone to show them photos. The roof is completely redone. All the windows have been replaced. The bathroom is functional, and I've started on the kitchen renovation. I scrolled through images showing the transformation. The new front porch steps, the freshly painted exterior, the cleared and landscaped yard with newly planted flower beds. You did all this yourself? Dad asked, sounding genuinely impressed as he studied a before and after shot of the living room. I've had help from neighbors with the specialized work, but I've done most of it myself, yes. It actually looks nice, Mom admitted reluctantly. But it's still so far from Chicago. And so small. It's perfect for me, I said simply. And I've negotiated a partial remote work arrangement with my firm. I'll only need to be in the office 2 days a week starting next month. This news clearly surprised them. My career had always been the one area where I received some parental approval, and any change to it would typically have triggered concern. Is that wise? Dad asked. Remote work arrangements can limit advancement opportunities. I've thought it through, I assured him. My performance metrics are excellent, and my boss is supportive. If anything, the arrangement has made me more productive since I'm not commuting 5 days a week. Jessica had been unusually quiet while I showed the house photos. Now she set down her fork with deliberate care. Well, I'm happy things are working out for you, Amanda. We should celebrate both our new ventures. She raised her water glass in a toast. To new beginnings. We all clinked glasses, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps we could build a healthier family dynamic. Perhaps the worst was behind us. Then Jessica added, and speaking of new beginnings, I wanted to ask for your input on something, Amanda. You're so good with numbers and practical details. Warning bells immediately rang in my head. What kind of input? Well, launching a coaching business requires some startup capital. My business coach recommends having at least $15,000 for the first 6 months to cover website development, marketing, program materials, a retreat scouting trip, and living expenses while I build my client base. I set down my fork carefully. And Mom and Dad have been incredibly generous, Jessica continued. They're covering my rent for the next 3 months and have contributed $5,000 toward business expenses. But I'm still about $10,000 short of what I need. Jessica, I said slowly, please tell me you're not asking me for money right now. Not all of it, she quickly clarified. Maybe just $3,000? You could consider it an investment in a family business. I'd pay you back with interest once I'm profitable. I looked at my parents, who were studiously avoiding eye contact. Did you know she was going to ask this? Mom fidgeted with her napkin. We thought it might be a good way for you girls to rebuild your relationship. A partnership of sorts. A partnership, I repeated flatly, where I give Jessica money for a business with no clients, no track record, and no concrete plan beyond wellness coaching, a field she's been interested in for all of 3 months. For months, Jessica corrected defensively. And I have certifications. From a weekend workshop and a 1-week retreat, I pointed out. That hardly qualifies you to charge people for life advice. You don't believe in me, Jessica accused, tears welling in her eyes right on cue. You never have. That's not fair, I countered. I've supported you through multiple career changes. I've listened to your plans and celebrated your interests. What I haven't done lately is fund them, and that seems to be the real issue here. Amanda, Dad interjected, his tone warning. Your sister is trying to build something meaningful. So am I exclaimed. I'm literally building a home with my own hands. Why is her business idea more deserving of family support than my house? Because family helps each other, Mom said, the edge returning to her voice, which you seem to have forgotten. Family helps each other, I repeated. Interesting concept. Let's talk about that. When I was working 3 jobs to pay for college, did family help me? When I needed a new transmission for my car last year and ate ramen for a month to afford it, did family help me? When I've achieved milestones in my career, has family celebrated me the way they celebrate Jessica's every whim? That's not the same, Mom protested. You've always been self-sufficient. You've never needed our help. Everyone needs help sometimes, I said quietly. Everyone needs support and recognition. I just learned early on not to expect it from this family unless my name was Jessica. That's so unfair, Jessica cried. You're making me sound like some kind of parasite.
I am stating facts, he replied.
In the last 5 years, how much money have Mom and Dad given you? How many times have they bailed you out of financial troubles? How many career changes have they funded? We support both our daughters, Dad insisted. Differently, I acknowledged. You support Jessica financially and emotionally. You support me by expecting me to be the responsible one who never needs anything and is always available to help clean up messes, usually Jessica's messes. If you're still angry about the retreat, Jessica began. This isn't about the retreat, I interrupted. This is about a lifetime of unequal treatment. This is about Mom literally telling me I was dead to them because I chose to invest in myself instead of you. This is about being invited back to family dinner only to be hit up for money again. That's not why we invited you, Mom protested, though her eyes shifted guiltily. Isn't it? Because we've spent this entire meal avoiding any real conversation about what happened 3 months ago. No one has apologized for disowning me. No one has acknowledged how hurtful that was. Instead, we've pretended everything is fine while setting up another request for me to finance Jessica's latest whim. It's not a whim, Jessica insisted. This is my calling. Just like yoga instruction was your calling? Or food blogging? Or event planning? I shook my head. I want to believe in you, Jessica. I really do. But I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep you warm. I stood up, suddenly certain that this reconciliation attempt had been doomed from the start. I'm not giving you money for your business. Not $3,000, not $300, not $3. If you want to prove this isn't just another passing phase, build it yourself. Show some dedication. Put in the work without expecting others to fund it. How dare you speak to your sister that way? Mom snapped, the tentative peace shattered. After all we've done to try to rebuild this family, what exactly have you done? I asked. Invited me to dinner, so Jessica could ask for money? Made my favorite dessert as a bribe? Those aren't relationship-building actions. They're manipulations. You've changed, Dad said, shaking his head. You used to understand family loyalty. I haven't changed. I corrected him. I've just stopped accepting the role assigned to me. And yes, I understand family loyalty. It should go both ways. It shouldn't be conditional on my financial support or compliance with unreasonable expectations. I picked up my purse and phone. I need to go. Thank you for dinner. So that's it? Jessica asked bitterly. You're choosing your little house project over your family again? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a strange mixture of compassion and detachment. I'm choosing my mental health and financial security over an unhealthy family dynamic. There's a difference. If you walk out that door, Mom threatened, don't expect another invitation. I paused at the threshold, a sense of déjà vu washing over me. You know what's interesting? Last time you gave me that ultimatum, it was terrifying. This time it feels like freedom. As I drove away from my childhood home, I realized something profound had shifted within me. The guilt that had always accompanied any act of self-preservation was absent. In its place was a sense of peace, the quiet certainty that I had done the right thing for myself, regardless of others' opinions. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely free of the need for my family's approval. And that freedom felt like finally coming home to myself. 6 months after the failed reconciliation dinner, I stood in the center of my completed living room, turning slowly to take in the transformation. What had once been a dilapidated shell was now a cozy, light-filled home that reflected both my practical nature and newfound creative confidence. The original hardwood floors, painstakingly sanded and refinished over countless weekends, gleamed in the afternoon sun streaming through new windows. The walls, once water-stained and crumbling, were now painted a warm cream that brightened the small space. The ceiling featured exposed beams that Frank had helped me restore, giving the room character and the illusion of height. My furniture was an eclectic mix of thrift store finds, upcycled pieces, and a few strategic new purchases. The couch, my biggest splurge, faced a small wood stove that would keep the space toasty during rural Illinois winters. Bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with my collection of novels, accounting references, and newly acquired home improvement guides. The kitchen, visible through an archway I'd widened during renovation, was compact but efficient. White cabinets, butcher block countertops, and open shelving maximized the limited space. A farmhouse sink installed under the window overlooked my vegetable garden, now yielding its first fall harvest. The bathroom, once a nightmare of cracked fixtures and mysterious stains, was now a surprisingly luxurious retreat with a clawfoot tub I'd found at a salvage yard and restored myself. The bedroom, though small, felt like a sanctuary with its simple platform bed and reading nook in the window alcove. Outside, the transformation was equally dramatic. The sagging porch had been rebuilt and extended to wrap around two sides of the house, creating space for outdoor dining and a porch swing. The yard, once overgrown and littered with debris, now featured neat landscaping, raised garden beds, and young fruit trees that would mature in the coming years. All told, I'd spent just under $18,000 on renovations, slightly more than my original budget, but still remarkably affordable for what was now a completely modernized home. More importantly, I owned it outright.
No mortgage. No rent.
Just reasonable property taxes and utility costs. Thomas, my now plump orange cat, rubbed against my legs as I continued admiring our home. "We did it, buddy," I told him, bending to scratch behind his ears. "Not bad for a shed in the woods, huh?" The doorbell rang. Still a novelty since I'd installed it just the previous week. I opened the door to find Rachel and David, arms laden with housewarming gifts and grocery bags. "Welcome to the official housewarming party," Rachel exclaimed, hugging me tightly before stepping back to look around. "Amanda, it's absolutely beautiful. I can't believe this is the same place we saw 6 months ago." "The transformation is incredible," David agreed, setting down a potted plant by the door. "And I'm not just talking about the house." I knew what he meant. The Amanda who had purchased this property a year ago was a different person from the woman who now stood confidently in her own home. The physical work of renovation had changed me externally. My formerly soft office body was now lean and strong, my skin sun-kissed even as autumn approached. But the internal changes were even more profound. Throughout the afternoon, more guests arrived: Frank and his wife Eleanor, Miguel and his family, Diane from the hardware store, and several other Millfield residents who had become friends during my renovation journey. By evening, my small house was filled with laughter, conversation, and the unmistakable warmth of community. As we gathered around the fire pit I'd built in the backyard, Frank raised his glass in a toast. To Amanda, who saw potential when others saw problems, and who reminded all of us old-timers that sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see the value in things we've overlooked. "And to new beginnings," Diane added, her glass joining his. "Millfield's lucky to have you." I blinked back unexpected tears, touched by their genuine affection. This was what family could be. Supportive without conditions, proud without competition, connected without manipulation. Later, after my guests had departed and I sat alone on my porch swing watching fireflies dance over the field, my phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from Jessica, the first contact from my biological family in nearly 4 months. "Saw your house pics on Instagram. It looks really nice. Hope you're doing well." I stared at the message, surprised by both its content and my own emotional response. There was no anger, no resentment, just a mild curiosity about what had prompted her to reach out. After careful consideration, I replied, "Thank you. I am doing well. Hope you are too." Her response came quickly. "Business is slow. Moved back in with Mom and Dad temporarily. Things are tense." I could imagine. Without me to focus on as the family problem, my parents and Jessica would have to face their own dysfunctional dynamic. "I'm sorry to hear that," I wrote back, meaning it sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish them unhappiness. 3 disappeared, then appeared again as Jessica composed her next message. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building something yourself. Do you think we could talk sometime? Not about money, just talk." I considered this request carefully. My life had found a peaceful rhythm without the drama of my family relationships. Did I want to disrupt that? On the other hand, personal growth wasn't just about cutting ties, it was also about establishing healthy boundaries where possible. I'd be open to that, I finally replied. On neutral ground. Coffee shop in Riverton. Riverton was a larger town halfway between Millfield and my parents' house. That works. Thank you. I set my phone aside, returning my attention to the fireflies and the gentle creaking of my porch swing. Whether anything productive would come from reconnecting with Jessica remained to be seen, but I was approaching it from a position of strength rather than obligation. My decision to purchase this house, this shed in the woods, as my mother had dismissively called it, had catalyzed the most significant growth of my adult life. Beyond gaining a valuable asset and practical skills, I discovered core truths about myself and relationships that had fundamentally changed my perspective. I'd learned that real security comes not from others' approval but from self-sufficiency and community connection. I'd discovered that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, but necessary for authentic relationships. I'd found that chosen family can be as meaningful as biological ties, sometimes more so. Most importantly, I'd realized that breaking unhealthy patterns requires more than just recognition. It demands concrete action and the courage to face disapproval from those accustomed to your compliance. My tiny house, once a desperate gamble, had become a physical manifestation of these lessons. Each repaired board, each painted wall, each carefully chosen fixture represented a decision to value myself enough to create the life I wanted, not the one others expected me to live. As darkness settled over my little piece of rural Illinois, I felt a deep contentment that had nothing to do with perfection. My life wasn't perfect. My relationships weren't perfect. My house, despite all the improvements, still had quirks and projects awaiting attention. But it was mine. All of it. The achievements and challenges, the solitude and community, the boundaries and connections, belonged to me in a way nothing in my previous life ever had. Thomas jumped onto my lap, purring loudly as he settled in for the evening. I scratched under his chin, watching as the last fireflies faded into the darkness and the first stars appeared overhead. "We made the right choice, buddy," I whispered. "This is exactly where we're supposed to be." Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own needs? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is prioritize your own well-being, even when others don't understand. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about my ongoing journey of self-discovery and home renovation. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share this video with them. Thank you for being part of my chosen community, and remember, the house you build for yourself, whether literal or metaphorical, is always worth the effort.